Some of the most bizarre 36 hours in recent Russian history. Vladimir Putin's one-time ally, Yevgeny Prigozhin, stepping away from what had appeared to be a certain armed confrontation. Troops from Prigozhin's Wagner Group in the streets with their leader amid celebrations after the announcement of a deal between Prigozhin and the Kremlin, brokered by the president of Belarus. That unrest is widely believed to have left Putin weakened and potentially vulnerable as the invasion of Ukraine grinds on. The Wagner Group is now leaving the battlefield where the fight is intensifying. Ukraine's 3rd Separate Assault Brigade posted these images that they say are from Saturday of trench warfare outside of Bakhmut. The Biden administration is closely monitoring events, and today Secretary of State Blinken said he doesn't think we've seen the final act. We have team coverage, including Elizabeth Schulze from the White House. But first, ABC's chief foreign correspondent Ian Pannell leads us off from Kharkiv.
Tonight, Russia reeling after a weekend of turmoil not seen in decades that's left Vladimir Putin looking humiliated and weakened. Troops from the Wagner mercenary group today continuing to withdraw from positions occupied on Saturday. But their mutiny against military chiefs leaves doubt and confusion in its wake. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken telling John Carlin this week he doesn't believe we've seen the final chapter.
It's still a moving picture, and I doubt we've seen the last act. But I think we can say this much. First, we've seen some very serious cracks emerge.
Historically, Prigozhin's been a long-time Putin ally, taking his armed mercenaries around the world, fighting and securing business interests for Russia and himself. Most recently, they were instrumental on the front lines in parts of Ukraine, where they were accused of terrible war crimes. But his relationship with Russia's senior military leadership broke down to the point where he suddenly declared an armed revolt. 10:15 p.m. Friday. Prigozhin announces his troops started a march of justice, crossing the border back into Russia. Yesterday, 7:30 a.m., Prigozhin says they've taken the HQ of the southern military district in Rostov-on-Don, controlling military facilities and a military airfield. Mama. Around noon, information on fighting around Voronezh appeared. Around 3:30 p.m., a column of Wagner fighters were noticed near Lipetsk, roughly 220 miles south of Moscow. But then suddenly at 8:29 p.m., Prigozhin announces he's turning back, 120 miles from the capital. The ease of Prigozhin's march through, still stunning and electrifying Putin's opponents. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, the exiled former oligarch, telling ABC's Patrick Reevell today it exposed extraordinary fragility. He says it's clearly demonstrated to everyone that the regime is weak, practically on the floor. Khodorkovsky, jailed by Putin for 10 years, now backing efforts to overthrow him. In exchange for halting his march on Moscow, Prigozhin and his men were given an amnesty, with Prigozhin being allowed to leave for neighbouring Belarus. Tonight, it's unclear if he's gone there and what other concessions he may have extracted. Across the border, fighting rages between Ukrainian troops and Russian forces. This video was filmed yesterday, according to Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade, who say it shows an advance on Russian positions around Bakhmut in the east. At one point, a grenade landing in the trench, injuring a Ukrainian soldier. Every inch, every mile, now heavily fought over. And on the southern front, around Zaporizhia, Special Forces soldiers in action, trying to push Putin's men back. Officer Ryan saying the more we hear that the Russians have conflicts, the more it raises our fighting spirit. Mikhailo Podolyak, senior advisor to President Zelensky, telling us their success on the battlefield will affect what happens inside Russia. Podolyak saying the more defeats we inflict on Russia, the faster the end will come to Russia as it is now.
As if the stakes weren't already high enough, and Ian Pannell joins us now. Ian, we're now hearing that Putin has completed preparations to potentially blow up Ukraine's Zaporizhia nuclear power plant.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. The head of Ukraine's military intelligence agency, Krilo Budanov, saying that Russia has completed preparations to potentially blow up that plant. Budanov telling the UK's New Statesman magazine the plan to stage a, quote, terrorist attack is now, quote, fully worked out and approved. Of course, this is something the Russians have denied in the past. But now he says it only awaits a final order, and never has the situation been so serious as now. Lindsay?
So much uncertainty. Ian, thank you. Now let's bring in ABC's Elizabeth Schulze, who joins us from the White House. Elizabeth, President Biden continues to monitor the situation. What's the latest from the White House?
Lindsay, in a call today with Ukrainian President Zelensky, President Biden insisted this crisis in Russia will not affect unwavering support for Ukraine from the U.S. and its allies. The White House is still trying to understand the parameters of the deal between Vladimir Putin and Yevgeny Prigozhin, but Secretary of State Antony Blinken says their power struggle is not a surprise. For months, the administration was tracking mounting tensions between Prigozhin and Putin's top military brass, and in recent days, U.S. intelligence officials briefed senior leaders in Congress about Wagner Group movements and possible action against the Russian Defense Ministry. Now, despite the instability in Moscow, Secretary Blinken insists Russia has not changed its nuclear posture, but he says he is watching very carefully. Lindsay.
And as he says, not the final act. Elizabeth.